And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 127th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HU. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, February 4th, 2020, where I am your host, Matthew Lukens. On the docket for tonight, we have a recap of Penn State and Ohio State, both those sucky games. We have a home games are important segment, and then we talk about the definition technically, but the definition of a must-win game in IU scenario, which is basically a must-win game, but is absolutely not a must-win game, but is a must-win game against Purdue this Saturday. So here with me tonight is the one and only Nathan Christian. So how are you doing tonight, Nathan?
I'm good, Matt. I'm doing a lot better than I was last week. Apologies to people who are listening and hearing me sound like a dead man. But you know, we're good. We're good now. Although IU basketball looked a little bit dead this past week.
Oh, that's an understatement.
We'll go into that. I mean, I wasn't expecting a win, but I guess as we've talked about more than once, Matt, the way it looked was not encouraging.
Right, and that's what we said last week. If you listened to the podcast last week, we said, like, look, 1-1, 0-2, 2-0. Like, what do you think we're gonna go? I think we all said 1-1 or 0-2, but we said it's fine to go 0-2 on the road in the Big Ten as long as you keep the games close. An 11 or 9-point loss to Ohio State, that was a lot more than that, and then a 15-point loss to Penn State. And that was never close, like never close. Both of those are unacceptable. Okay, like we lose on a game-winning shot in Ohio State, and it's soul crushing, but we lose. That's fine because then we lost 2 of the last 3 games within 1 possession scores. No, but the performance we had in Ohio State and performance we had in Penn State was unacceptable. Am I right?
Absolutely, and you know, the most concerning part to me is, okay, I understand that both Ohio State and Penn State are top 25 Ken Palm teams right now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, look, Penn State probably played a C+ game for them, and Ohio State maybe a B or a B-. And Indiana didn't even make them sweat, really, maybe after the first half at Penn State.
Yeah, no, it was 3 straight halves of terrible basketball. I think I saw a shot chart for IU's bigs and forwards against Ohio State, and it was nothing but circles. You know, solid dots are what you make, and circles are the shots that you don't make. And it was nothing but circles. Our guys have been missing bunnies. They've been missing shots they have missed in the past. I don't know if it's a confidence thing. I don't know if it's because they're on the road and the road environment. I don't know if it's the lack of calls they're getting from the officials or whatever it is. But our guys are just flat out missing, and it's really annoying.
Well, and yeah, I mean, part of it was no Jerome Hunter and Race Thompson on Wednesday against Penn State.
Fair.
And then Thompson continued his absence on Saturday against the Buckeyes, and we'll see if he's available this coming Saturday against Purdue. He's right. An important piece to this puzzle all of a sudden. I mean, he's one of Indiana's best rebounders. He's able to convert inside on those second chance points, which Indiana did not have barely any last week. But at the same time, it's funny, like you said that, Matt, like Seth Davis, who is a BTN analyst who was on the call for Indiana's game against Penn State on Wednesday, said something like, well, the game is called basketball, and Indiana's having a tough time putting the ball in the basket.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I was like, all right. That's why they pay him the big bucks, right? Some brilliant analysis like that. I mean, it's scary. Indiana's got one of the worst 3-point percentages in the country. Yeah. I mean, in the nation. And it's hard to imagine how an Indiana University basketball team has difficulty in that area. It'd be like a Florida or Miami football team struggling with speed. I mean, you just don't see that. Sometimes they struggle in other areas, the defense or throwing the football or catching the whatever. But the speed part is usually settled. That's kind of similar here. Like, Indiana should not be having this many problems shooting the 3 yet. What was it against Penn State? Hoosiers went 2 for 11 beyond the arc. Against Ohio State, it was a little bit better. Indiana went 7 for 12, and they still I don't know. I don't get what the problem is with this team. When the outside shots are falling, the ones inside aren't going in. The one when the Daisy are finally making the buckets inside, the outside shot fails to fall.
The guard play at Penn State was nothing less than despicable. They made 2 buckets all game.
3. Hey, it was 3, Matt.
Sorry, 3.
They
made 3 all game. That is unacceptable. We have 4 guards. You make 3 baskets. Like, you cannot possibly win a Division I basketball game if your guards only score 3 baskets.
Well,
then fast forward to the Ohio State game, our forwards and our guards, who are supposed to be responsible for rebounding, got out-rebounded by – I don't have the rebound margin in front of me currently, but we're out-rebounded. I swear to you, I think they had more possessions in a row than we did, like, in the first half. Like, I'm telling you that we probably had, like, 20 possessions. There must have been possessions where Ohio State had 4, 5, 6 possessions in the row. It's just the ball would go out of bounds on somebody, or both guys would go for the rebound and fumble it, or one guy out battles 3 IU players. That Ohio State had so many second chance points. You made life easy for the Buckeyes.
Matt, Ohio State had 14 more field goal attempts than Indiana did on Saturday.
Exactly.
In most games, just think about it. For those of you listening, field goal attempts for each team should be about even. Okay? Each team has an even number of possessions normally. That wasn't the case on Saturday. Ohio State had 56 field goal attempts. Indiana had 42. Ohio State basically had a free shot to, a chance to score 28 more points simply because they're able to rebound the basketball more. And in a 9-point game, that makes all the difference in the world. But let's backtrack for just a second, Matt. I want to talk about the guard play.
Okay.
Because that's something you mentioned. And look, I don't know you that much, Matt. But in your rebellious days, did your parents ever say, "I'm not mad at you. I'm just disappointed"?
Oh yeah, a lot.
Yeah, and that cuts a little deeper, doesn't it? Like that. Yeah, like if they yell at you, you're kind of like, "All right, Mom," or Dad, like settle down.
Yeah.
But when they throw the disappointed thing at you, that really hurts. And that's how I think Indiana fans right now feel about this guard rotation for IU. I think Indiana fans are sick and tired of being angry at guys like Al Durham and Devontae Green and Rob Finney for the bricked threes, for the turnovers, for the breakdowns on defense.
Come on, I'm almost there.
And it's just based on the Twitter reaction and Facebook reaction, it's almost like Indiana fans are going past that. We're angry at these guys and we want them to do better. And it's just it's so deflating. And the way I am, man, it's like when I see a problem, I think you're like this also. You want to talk about solutions. You want to talk about answers. And guard play has been a problem since day one. The way I look at it is with this extra time that Indiana has, this 7-day break before Purdue, to me, this is when Armaan Franklin needs to be getting more reps in practice so that he can play more in games. I think Franklin's a guy that can be a 22 to 25 minute per game guy, not the player who played something like 7 or 8 minutes against Ohio State on Saturday, most of which were in garbage time. I want more Armaan Franklin. Am I crazy? Or is this something where you're saying, keep it going with Green and Durham and Finney and see how far they can take this team?
I don't think you're crazy. And I think the analytics back you up. I think our best lineups, if I remember correctly, our best lineups against Michigan State had Armaan Franklin on the floor. And I don't think that's coincidental. And that his best games have been our best games this year, outside of the Florida State game. And he was still way early on his development. And Devontae Green just had one of those Devontae Green games. And Devontae Green hasn't had a game like that since. He just got rid of all of his magic during the Florida State game and has not yet eclipsed that performance this year. And nor do I think he will eclipse it the rest of the year. It's just a one-off. I don't think he'll be any better than that. Rob Finney was much better against Ohio State, I thought, but still we didn't get a win because our forwards played some lackluster rebounding and lackluster defense. But the lone bright spot the last 3 games have been Jerome Hunter. He missed Penn State. We could have used him. He hit three threes against Ohio State.
Two
against Ohio State. Yeah, he was 2 of 4 against Ohio State. And hit a couple big threes in the Maryland game. And to see him get in the rotation more is nice. However, if he's going to get in rotation, he's going to hit shots, he's got to do it on the defensive end too. And there's plenty of times during the Ohio State game where he got caught out defensively. I think there was one in the backcourt door cut by Arns that really drove me crazy. But as long as he can use this like 7 days to get, back in defensive mindset and go out against Purdue, he's going to be one of our most important players down the stretch.
I think Hunter and Franklin are 2 guys that we're going to see more of here, especially with back-to-back home games coming up. And the question probably becomes, okay, if you're going to give those guys more playing time, who do you take it away from? And to me, it's an interesting question because if you're asking to take someone off the court, it's hard. Like, I don't know if you can take Justin Smith off the court. I think this is a guy who's still 30 minutes a game, and he still contributes in a number of ways, even if it's not at an NBA level, which is not happening. But, even if it's not an NBA level, he helps you a lot. I don't know if I remove Brunk, Joey Brunk. I don't know, because he's too valuable as a rebounder. So let me ask you that question. I mean, is it the guards that you take off the court? I don't know. If it's more Franklin and more Hunter, who is it less of going forward?
Less Al Durham. As much as I love Al, I think asking him to play backup point guard is not what he's here to do. We're asking too much of Al. Al is a junior captain, but that does not mean Al has to, be the best player on the team. Al is not the best player on the team. He was not brought into IU to ever be the best player on IU's team. He was recruited. He was highly recruited. He was not highly recruited out of Georgia. And I'm not surprised that that's his role now as a junior captain, because when he was coming into IU, we thought, wow, this guy is so excited to be an IU player. He's so excited. He loves IU. He loves Christian, whatever. But we never thought he was going to be anything more than maybe the second best guard on a team as a senior, right? Like, that was his trajectory. And to ask him to be, the second point guard and come in and lead the offense like that, he's not a point guard. We didn't recruit him to be a point guard. He's a 2 guard. And we're asking him to do way too much. And that's not his role. So I think his role should come down. I think Rob Finney's role should go up. He should play more. I think Devontae Green's role should go down until he proves that he can not take stupid shots. And then Armand Franklin's role goes up.
Yeah, I think that's about fair, if you ask me, because I don't think Smith can be taken off the floor, even if he has some real hair pulling moments, and he's going to have a few. That's just the kind of player he is. You're not going to take Jackson Davis off the court. Joey Brunk, he missed a ton of close looks the last couple of games, but his role is pretty clearly defined, and Indiana needs his leadership on the court more than anything. So all in all, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's got to be less Al Durham and less Devontae Green. You talked about Durham, Matt. How about this? In conference play this year, he's shooting 33% from the field. That's mind-blowing. Al Durham needs to be a guy. And by the way, he was a 40% field goal percentage guy his freshman year in Big Ten games. Now his junior, he's down to 33%. That's inexplicable. I mean, Al Durham's a guy whose shooting is something that we were looking forward to at the start of the season.
Yeah.
Something's fallen off the face of the earth with him as far as the actual shooting of the basketball. The actual basketball part goes.
Yeah, the basketball is not going in the basket for Al Durham, and that is problem number 1 for most people on this team. And maybe he's battling an injury we don't know of, right? Like, I use very, very, information tight when it comes to injuries, and they withhold that, at all costs, right? And maybe he's got something going on there, right? And give him the benefit of the doubt. But I just think his role is so undefined that it's actually hurting him because he doesn't know what he's supposed to do, right? He comes in sometimes and he's supposed to run the offense. And then the next time he comes in, he's supposed to attack. And the next time he comes in, he's supposed to be a spot-up shooter. Then the next time he's supposed to not only attack, but run the offense and spot-up shoot at the same time. And you can't be like, here, 5-minute stretch, out. Go out there, those next 5-minute stretch, and just attack. And you go, okay, I'll go do that. And then halfway through the stretch, go, okay, now be point guard. It's way too confusing. He's got way too much on his plate. He needs to be a guy that comes in. He got 27 minutes against Ohio State. Gets 20 minutes a game. You cut it down 7 minutes. You add the other 7 minutes to Armand Franklin. So he's still one of the highest earning minute guards, but you bring it down and you just go attack every time you're in there. Don't worry about running the offense. Don't worry about that. Just try to get fouled. Try to go at the rim because that is his best attribute, right? Coming into college, it was not his three-point shooting. He was not a three-point shooter when he came in. He was a guy that could finish with both hands. He's a lefty that can finish with his right. So when he comes in off the bench, just ask him to do what he's good at, which is going to the rim. He hasn't been finishing well, but eventually the refs have to start calling fouls or else I'm going to lose my mind. So, and I think Archie is too. You saw how dejected he was against Ohio State when he weren't getting calls. He's going to have to get calls. He's going to put pressure on the defense, and he's a decent free throw shooter. And that's what he's got to do going into games. And I think that's what Archie's going to change for the upcoming game against Purdue.
And to me, what's even more surprising with Durham, he's not even averaging 2 rebounds per game in Big Ten play. And Archie's talked about how important it is for the guards in IU's defensive system to crash the boards and make sure that once the bigs block the opposing bigs out of the way, right, the guards need to swoop in for the rebounds. And Durham, as someone who's watched a solid number of games in person over the last couple of years, he's one of Indiana's best rebounders as far as size and instincts and skills and hands. Yes. So that 1.8 rebounds per game in Big Ten play just isn't enough. And he's going to be really important here in these last few games in the regular season with basically a month to go that define what people think of when it comes to this Indiana basketball team this last month. Al Durham's going to have to be a major force as far as, like you said, getting to the line as well as rebounding the basketball.
He's going to have to be a captain, and that's a lot to ask for him because it's not what he was brought in to be. But he's going to have to play like a captain, or he's going to have to play to the best of his ability. He doesn't have to be at like a captain level, right? But as long as he plays and puts his heart out on the court, that's all I'm asking for him. He's being asked to do too much, and it's just really sad. And we're going to need him to rebound against Purdue because Purdue, again, has Nojel Eastern, who's a really big guard. And is pretty good at rebounding himself. And we'll talk about that later. Is there anything else you want to add about the Ohio State or Penn State game?
So much of this now falls on Indiana's shoulders, and specifically between their ears, right? What's going on in the locker room? What's going on in the mindset of these players? Because starting Saturday, you're going to have a couple of home games, and there's a lot of pressure on this team because if you can't play well on the road, you're going to have to hold serve at home. And it's a lot harder to do that when there's a world of pressure on your shoulders. But that's the situation Indiana is in.
Yep, and it's unfortunate because I feel like we were in this situation last year and things went south. We're like, this is a must-win game. And then the next game, this is a must-win game. And then the next game, this is a must-win game. So pinch me. I think I'm in Groundhog Day. It just happened, and I think I'm still stuck there. Anyways, before we get to our next major segment, Nathan, who won this week in the past week of IU sports?
Yeah, it was a good week for IU women's basketball, and we haven't talked about them in a little bit here, but they're still in the top 25. They had a little bit of a slump there that they've dug themselves out of. Indiana had a really fun come-from-behind win against Wisconsin late last week, and then they went on the road to West Lafayette against Purdue.
Yep.
And they knocked off the Boilermakers on Monday on Big Ten Network. A pretty convincing win, wire to wire. Purdue made it close at a couple spots there, but Indiana had a 2-0 week. they've got a big game coming up Thursday against Maryland. Maryland knocked off Indiana in College Park about a couple of weeks ago. Now Indiana's got a chance to return the favor in Bloomington. It's a matchup of 2 top 25 teams. Also, Allie Patberg, a guard who's a former Indiana Miss Basketball. She was named to the Wooden Award late season watch list. So is National Player of the Year. I mean, that's the kind of accomplishment we're talking about. She's on the top 20 watch list, along with a lot of other famous women's college basketball players like Sabrina Ionescu on Oregon, one of the most well-known college basketball players in the ladies game right now. So Allie Patberg's doing great individually. Indiana's right on track as a team. We sent out a tweet yesterday about Indiana's recent success versus Purdue in the women's game. And I'm going to ask all of you to go over to the Indiana HQ Twitter account to see it, because what Terry Morin's doing right now with the program, especially in that rivalry series, is pretty impressive.
Yep, and hopefully that's what Archie gets going here soon for the guys team. Anyways, our next segment is titled Home Games Are Important. And I know I don't need to stress to you knowledge basketball fans that listen to our podcast that winning your home games is obvious, right? It's easier to win at home. Assembly Hall has the best crowd in college basketball. We play better at home. It's obvious by our last 2 performances on the road where we looked like a shell of ourselves that home is where the heart lies, and we need to win at home. Nathan, why is winning at home so important?
Look, it's almost as simple as this. We talked last week, or perhaps the week before, about how Indiana needs to get to that 20-win mark. The 20-win mark is as simple as it gets. If they get to 20, they're going to make the NCAA tournament. Well, here's the deal. Indiana's got 15 wins right now, and they've got 5 home games to go.
Yep.
All right, so you guys can do the math at home, okay? If you hold serve at Assembly Hall, you're going to make it. And here's the deal. Like, you're not facing teams like Michigan State or Maryland, who I think are 2 of the 3 best teams in the Big Ten, along with Illinois. I mean, maybe Iowa's in that mix, and Iowa does come to Assembly Hall. So really, Indiana's got still this season completely within their control. Right. You can do the math. 15 wins currently, 5 home games left. You win them all, you're going to be in the dance. But if you slip even once, and right now Ken Palm is projecting Indiana to finish with a 19-12 record. If you slip even once, now you're asking this team to find a road win either at Michigan, at Minnesota, at Purdue, or at Illinois. And I mean, we can argue for hours about how good all those teams are. But again, it's easier to win any one of your home games than it is to win any one of your road games. And Indiana simply plays better, guys. Like, it's not that complicated. Indiana simply plays better at Assembly Hall. And it's a pretty drastic difference. They slumped into some old habits last week where they started to kind of slump their shoulders, and they weren't very communicative on the floor, and they started missing a bunch of shots. All of that changes when they come to Assembly Hall. Assembly Hall's got a completely different magic about it, and that's why it's so important. All of a sudden, Indiana's body language changes. They become a lot more enthusiastic, and all of a sudden, the more shots start falling. And even if they fall in a deficit against Maryland like they did last Sunday, well, they still find a way to get back in the game and take the lead. So it's a completely different basketball team at Assembly Hall, and they've got to win out at home, because I honestly don't think they're going to win a road game from those 4 that we mentioned.
Correct. So I'm going to play a little game with you, Nathan. I want you to tell me, what are your 2 most winnable home games, and what are the 2 least winnable home games left on our schedule?
I would say the most winnable are Purdue and Minnesota. Okay. I think Purdue comes in here on Saturday. First of all, Indiana's going to have a week off before playing the Boilermakers. On the other hand, Purdue, they've got a tough game against Iowa coming up, I believe, tomorrow. And that's Wednesday for those of you, just to be clear. They've got a tough game against Iowa on Wednesday before facing Indiana on Saturday. That's a pretty quick turnaround for the Boilermakers. Indiana's got those extra days off, and they're going to come back home. So I think Purdue's the easiest. Minnesota, I think, is a very beatable team, especially at Assembly Hall. We have seen Minnesota go on the road and beat Ohio State, which is something Indiana did not do. And it wasn't close.
No.
And
not even.
And the one thing is, like, Indiana will have already seen Minnesota once on the road before the rematch at Assembly Hall. So I think they'll have a little bit more confidence, a little bit more experience against that Minnesota team. So those are the two most winnable. The two least, first and foremost, I'm going to say Iowa. And this is an Iowa team that's coming into Assembly Hall a week from Thursday. And I'll tell you one thing about the Hawkeyes. Those guys, they can really play. I mean, it doesn't matter. Forget, like, first of all, this is a team that made the round of 32 last year in NCAA tournament. They won an NCAA tournament game, so hats off to them. They're not afraid of Assembly Hall. They won in Bloomington last year. And Luka Garza, I mean, this guy is a front runner for National Player of the Year. He's a stretch four who can bang down threes, hit you inside, score in a variety of ways, decent on defense. He checks all the boxes and is the dream modern NBA or even college basketball forward. Iowa's going to be the hardest home game without question to me. The other one, I mean, we just saw Penn State. Yeah. And Penn State all of a sudden has turned into this real gnarly defensive-minded team. Lamar Stevens is another extremely talented basketball player.
He's so good.
And he can beat you in a number of ways, even when he doesn't score, because he didn't have a great time shooting the ball against Indiana last Wednesday, but he still had a number of rebounds. He was a factor as far as getting to the foul line and getting Indiana into foul trouble. And then sort of the one game that we didn't talk about was Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's a tough team, but I think Indiana, with that being senior day, even though I think that kind of falls in the middle. So that's how I'm thinking about it. What are your thoughts as far as the easiest games, the toughest games, especially at Assembly Hall?
I think the easiest games, you nailed it on the head. I think Purdue's the easiest game. We have to win this game on Saturday. Yeah. One, because I don't want to deal with the insufferable Purdue fans if we do lose at home to them. But two, then it makes everything harder, and then I think the sky is basically falling.
You're going to have a lot of insufferable Indiana fans.
Oh,
if IU loses that game.
Be insufferable all over, and I hate insufferable situations. And then we have the Iowa following it, and I agree that Iowa is probably the hardest game we have left. However, I think Trace Jackson-Davis is athletic enough to guard Luka Garza decently. He's going to have a tough time. He's going to get in foul trouble. But I think when it comes down, push comes to shove, it comes down to the wire, I think Trace Jackson-Davis has it in him to be a really, really good matchup against Luka Garza, who, while is a great shooter and very skilled, is not the most athletic person you've ever seen on a basketball court. Even though he can move, he's just, he's not super athletic. And Trace is one of the 20 best athletes maybe ever to put on an IU uniform. So I do like that matchup for Trace. And then Purdue, obviously, I talked about them. Minnesota, we have to win at home against them. Wisconsin, we have to win at home, obviously. And then Penn State's going to be tough, and it'll be a homecoming for I guess not a homecoming, but a reunion with Curtis Jones coming home to IU, which will be interesting to say the least. So, the upcoming basketball schedule is crazy. We've got Purdue on Saturday. Then next Thursday, we've got Iowa. And then next Sunday is away at Michigan. So what do you think the record is after those three games?
Oh, man. I think it's going to be 1-2, Matt. I think it's going to be 1-2. And I know Indiana fans aren't going to like hearing that. But this is a brutal stretch. I think Indiana will take care of business on Saturday against the Boilermakers. I think that's the one they win.
Right.
But Iowa's a different team than just all the others in the Big Ten. They play fast. They hit a bunch of threes in your face. And while they're beatable, and hey, if Indiana wins this game against the Hawkeyes a week from Thursday, and we'll get more into detail on this Iowa matchup next week on the podcast. But
next Tuesday.
If Indiana wins this game, it's another feather in the cap because Iowa's a really highly rated team. but they're different than Michigan State. They're different than Maryland. They're different than Florida State. They space you out and they hit you with threes. And that game against Illinois, when Iowa took on Illinois on Super Bowl Sunday, that was an outstanding 40 minutes of college basketball.
That was a great game.
They were just throwing haymakers at each other, metaphorically. And it was really fun to watch. So I think they lose to Iowa, and then I just am as much as Michigan's struggling, I'm not picking Indiana to win a road game. If they show me they win a road game, I'll be more than glad to admit that I was wrong.
Yeah, I have to agree with you that we're going to lose against Iowa. But I don't like this Michigan team. And I also think there's some weird drama going on behind the scenes with Xavier Simpson and Michigan. So I'm going to pick us to beat Michigan. So I'm going to say we're going to go 2-1. And I'm going to be the optimist this podcast.
Interesting.
And also, you talk about haymakers, about Iowa and Illinois. I swear I thought Fran McCaffrey was going to start throwing haymakers at the Illinois assistant coaches. I think he kind of wanted to, but had that voice, and I was like, no, Fran, don't do it, Fran. Anyways.
Yeah, the voice, and I would love to have a chat with the voice inside Fran McCaffrey's head.
That would be funny. That'd be actually. Somebody needs to make that a comic.
Yeah, anyways. Right. By the way, speaking of Michigan, they're down at home to Ohio State by 2 points with about 20 seconds to go. So hey, you're talking a little drama, and maybe you're facing Michigan at the right time. But to me, it's show me before I predict anything.
Remember when Michigan was ranked number 4 this year? I feel like Michigan is having the season that Indiana had in 2016. I feel like that's it. You get up to number 4 in the country after beating Kansas, and then just slowly fall off a cliff as the season goes on.
The Big Ten this year has swallowed up a couple of teams in Michigan and Ohio State that we just did not expect either team to lose as many games as they have. Right. I mean, those two teams were close to number 1 in the country, and now they're at the bottom 5 or 6.
If Michigan and Ohio State make the tournament, here is my hot take. If they make the tournament, I think one of them is making the Elite 8. I don't know which one it is, but they're going to. They're going to be like a 9 seed or 10 seed and somehow make the Elite 8, because that's just what's going to happen. You just know it's going to happen. There's always one Big Ten team that's not supposed to make the Elite 8 and somehow gets there. You're like, that's our Big Ten representative. And meanwhile, Michigan State lost in the round of 32. Anyways, moving on. Before we get to our next segment, I want listeners to remind listeners to subscribe, rate, and share the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Your love really helps us grow this podcast and reach more lovable fans such as yourselves. Anyways, my social media shout out this week is going to be for the Indiana women's basketball team. Nathan covered them and who won the week. So I'll just say what their Instagram and Twitter is, which is at Indiana WBB. That's at Indiana WB. They had an awesome picture of the whole team in the locker room celebrating with the barn burner trophy. So that's a really cool photo. You should go give that a like. Really funny photo. Anyways, moving on. We just talked about the game a little bit about Purdue, so let's highlight it. Let's talk about it. Let's preview. So Purdue preview. Purdue is 28th in Ken Pom. Why Ken Pom loves Purdue so much? And I know it's the preseason ranking, and everybody tells me this, but I think that's stupid, Ken Pom. I don't like that. Purdue's still 28th in Ken Pom, even though they're 11-10. Saturday, February 8th at 2 p.m. on ESPN. Indiana has a 49.4% chance to win according to ESPN, which ESPN, you can suck my figurative middle finger about that predictive rating. Anyways, we have 58% to win on Ken Pom, and I like Ken Pom a lot better. And he predicts us to win 63-61. Nathan, the Purdue Boilermakers, our rival, Purdue. What are we going to expect from them?
Well, first of all, I mean, we were talking a little bit about how good Iowa is. Purdue tomorrow is a 3.5 point favorite at home over Iowa. So this is interesting, right? Because Iowa is one of the top teams of the Big Ten. Purdue, the odds makers expect Purdue to beat them. They're 12-10 I mean, for all the love that the computers are giving Purdue, the Boilermakers are 12-10. They're 5-6 in Big Ten play, and they're a team that scheduled really tough in the non-conference, and at the same time have struggled in conference play. Here's the thing with Purdue, and it's been, they're completely different than the team you saw last year in the Elite Eight. Obviously, there's no Carson Edwards anymore. There's no Ryan Klein anymore. This is a team that has completely changed their identity. They're a defensive-minded team that loves to force turnovers and really muddy things up. They're very similar to those Bo Ryan Wisconsin teams that you saw a few years ago. They're going to slow the game down, and they're going to try to rock fight their way to a win at Assembly Hall on Saturday. And honestly, Indiana might be comfortable playing that kind of basketball because that's, Indiana's built an identity on defense. But, this Purdue team can go really long periods of time without scoring. And it's crazy that we're talking about Indiana and Purdue. That
sounds familiar.
Indiana and Purdue having problems scoring the basketball. But Purdue has the worst offense in the Big Ten as far as what's gone on in conference play so far. So at the end of the day, if Indiana's defense struggles against Purdue, that's a really bad sign. I mean, this is a Purdue offense that's worse than Northwestern's. That's worse than Nebraska's. Okay? If Indiana leaks points against Purdue on Saturday, that's going to be really bad news because Purdue's defense is probably going to give Indiana problems. So they're a defensive-minded team. As far as individuals go, again, I mentioned no more Carson Edwards, no more Ryan Klein. The big man Travion Williams is a guy to watch out for.
Yeah.
This is a dude who's a double-double machine. He averages about 14 points a game in conference play. He'll throw in nearly 10 rebounds of his own as well. It's a big man. It's going to be a tough man to guard. I expect Joey Brunk to start out on him defensively, and we'll see if Brunk can carry over his strong home defense. At Assembly Hall, Brunk has shown that he can be a really, really tough defender, and he needs to keep that going. Purdue overall, Matt Painter, the head coach, he'll play 9 guys, about 15 minutes or more per game. The interesting sort of wild card for Purdue is a guard named Jihad Proctor. He's a transfer from High Point University, and he kind of has that Carson Edwards role where he kind of comes in, he likes to shoot the basketball, but Proctor has been all over the place. At the start of the year, he was a double-figure per game machine. He would score in the 10s and the 12, 14, 16 points per game. And then all of a sudden, once conference play started, he completely disappeared. All of a sudden, though, at Rutgers, he scored 19. Against Northwestern, he chipped in 9 more points, and he's kind of started to figure things out. So as we've talked about Indiana's guards having problems, Jihad Proctor, transfer from High Point, he's had his own difficulties, but he is still capable of lighting up Assembly Hall like we've seen a few other guys do for 15 or 20 quick points and can turn a game on its head, especially if it's low scoring.
That's right. And then, of course, Purdue has Matt Harms and Sasha Stefanovic, who are going to be obviously fan favorites in Assembly Hall. If you can reminisce about last year's treatment of Matt Harms at Assembly Hall. Yeah, I mean, it's you said rock fight. That's what this game is going to be. If you are tuning in at 2:00 on ESPN on Saturday, expecting the Picasso, the Leonardo da Vinci of basketball games, you are about to get exactly not that. You're going to get West Virginia coal mine basketball is what you're going to get. Nothing but a rock fight. And don't be surprised if the game is like 40-39 with 2 minutes left.
Which is what that was the case last year at Assembly Hall, right? In fact, it might have even been in the 30s for both teams. Now, look, that was a different scenario where you had some NBA guys on both teams just struggling to score.
Everybody struggled to score during
that. Juwan Morgan, Edwards, everyone.
There was like 6 easy layups that Juwan Morgan just
Right.
clanked off the rim. Like, why? Use the backboard, Juwan.
Well, of course. I mean, we're all this talk about a defensive struggle. It probably ends up in the 80s for all we know. But look, I don't expect it. Like you said, Harms and Stefanovic, good players as well. Nogel Eastern is another trickster because he's a guy who's averaging 5.5 points per game in Big Ten play, except recently, especially in the month of January specifically, he gave teams a lot of problems. He was a big reason why Purdue nearly upset Maryland in College Park. He had 14-6 in that game. Against Michigan State at home, a game where Purdue won by a zillion points. He had 9 points and 7 rebounds. He did go scoreless at Northwestern on Saturday, a game Purdue nearly lost, but nearly doesn't, that's the operative word there. They found a way to win by 3 in Evanston. He went scoreless in that one. So again, he's up and down and all over the place, but he's a guy who gave Indiana fits last year. So keep an eye out for him as well.
I wish we nearly lost road games.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That would be okay. So anything else? I got nothing else on Purdue. Like what happened Saturday is going to be, can we make enough shots? Can we keep them from getting out in transition with not Edwards, but with Jihad Proctor and their other guards,
Hunter Thompson, Eric Hunter
Thompson. Yeah. If we keep them from getting out in transition, we can not get out offensive rebounded again like we did Ohio State and play good defense. I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, the key, honestly, in this game too, if you ask me, is the key to me in this game, if you ask me, is you cannot turn the ball over if you're Indiana, because Purdue is going to try their hardest to poke the ball away, to block shots, and like you said, get out in the fast break. Indiana cannot have as many live ball turnovers as they had against Penn State and Ohio State. If you throw a pass out of bounds, it is what it is. That happens to everyone. But the really silly stuff where you fumble the ball and the other team intercepts it and scores at the other end, an easy layup or a dunk, those are going to be absolute killers in this game because Purdue really struggles in their half-court offense. So if you don't give them those opportunities, that's going to bode well for Indiana. Big picture, as everyone I know has a few days here before this Indiana-Purdue game on Saturday, there's a lot of pressure on IU to win this game.
Yeah.
There is a lot of pressure, and
I think we put some pressure on them in this podcast just now too.
I hope they're not listening. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they are. I doubt it.
I mean, it'd be an honor if they were listening, but at the same time, like, I'm sorry about everything I've ever said bad about you.
Hey, there's no need to apologize. Criticism is fair. Maybe
sometimes I go a little bit sharper than it needs to be. Anyway, this is fine.
There is a lot of pressure and tension and stress on this Indiana team going, that it's going to start at 2:00.
Not just Saturday. On the team, within the community, within the IU basketball, everybody's stressed. It's just a ball of stress on Twitter.
And look,
right now.
It doesn't matter if Indiana wins by a single basket or by 35. All that matters is that Indiana finds a way to win. And again, before in this podcast, I've talked about how I care a little bit more than just about whether Indiana wins or loses. I care about how they play. That goes out the door in this game on Saturday. As long as Indiana wins, it's all good. And if Indiana loses, Indiana might shoot 100% from 3 on Saturday. But if they lose, that is a catastrophe.
It's always a catastrophe if you shoot 100% from 3 and lose. That is an absolute. We shot 58% from 3 against Ohio State and lost.
You will not be able to put lipstick on this pig if Indiana loses to Purdue on Saturday, because all the goodwill that IU built up with those wins against Florida State and Ohio State and Michigan State, and I'm sure, and there were a couple neutral site wins in there over UConn and Notre Dame, like all that goodwill that Indiana built up, and a big reason, and let's be completely honest, they're easily in the tournament field right now.
Yeah.
Comfortably.
Thanks to Michigan State and Florida State.
Sure thing. But all of it goes out the door if you lose this game to Purdue on Saturday, because it just means that there are a lot of problems on a systematic level with this program. And look, Assembly Hall is going to be loud. It's going to be excited, but then it's going to get a bit nervous, and then we'll see whether these guys can come through on Saturday, hit some big free throws, avoid the silly turnovers. If you can do that, you're going to win. And then you're going to feel good about yourself because after this game on Saturday, now you've got some games with a little bit less pressure. But the Purdue game on Saturday is win at all costs.
By the way, you mentioned earlier about the don't throw the ball out of bounds. Or throw the ball out of bounds is okay, but like none of those silly turnovers. You're going to be, eating your words when Devontae Green throws a 98 mile per hour curveball to Deron Davis's feet like he did against Ohio State.
Oh, yeah. Well, again,
it's those out of bounds throws that drive me insane.
Turnovers are not ideal in any
ever.
Capacity.
Correct. There we go. We're getting a political statement here.
But there are certain ones that are worse. And, the ones where you just throw a cross-court pass that a guy like Nojel Eastern intercepts and cruises on in for a layup. That
literally
gives confidence.
The ball and then goes on. Yeah.
I mean, those are the ones that, Archie Miller himself has talked about the importance of avoiding those. So that's what it's going to come down to. Don't turn the ball over, hit some free throws, show that positive body language and confidence that you've shown at Assembly Hall before. And I'm predicting Indiana win this game. All I know is, though, it's going to be a little bit of a gut wrencher. And we'll see what happens.
You heard it here first, folks. It's going to be a gut wrencher on Saturday.
Right. A butt cheek.
But we vote. Yes. My band director. Okay, this is another story. My band director used to tell me to squeeze the grape when you march and pretended like you had a grape between both cheeks. And when you were walking straight, you squeezed the grape. He was from Michigan State and Strange. Anyways, that's gonna about wraps it up for the 127th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to the live audience for coming in and participating in the chat section. We really appreciate your support. We will be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. God, I never thought I'd tell that storyline on there. News and updates come through Twitter. Please subscribe to our show so you don't miss our weekly shows. Guys can't miss our stuff. Most importantly, if you enjoy the show, leave a review on iTunes or Facebook. Tell a friend. Share our links. Your support is how we grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as you wonderful selves. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.